Hey folks, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by here for our weekly Wednesday night live stream. Happy to see you all. Lots to talk about tonight. Lots to talk about. Some funny things. We're going to get through some MAGA coat material. But we're going to talk about the AOC versus Jimmy Dore thing. I mentioned it in my video earlier today, but I wanted to have an actual discussion. I already see people having some good debate in the comments here in the chat. And so I know this is something people still want to talk about. I don't know if you'll be angry with me after we talk about it, but I know that people like my viewpoints for nuance and for, bringing in multiple perspectives. So I'll do my best to do that. We'll also talk about some Canadian stories, including the NDP rising in the polls, as well as the Conservative Party leader, Erin O'Toole, making an absolutely horrific and inexcusable statement about residential schools and why they were formed and trying to make it a partisan issue and just very ugly things. So right off the top here, I see Samantha Sider said, hey, would you say the Squad are like the NDP in a liberal minority government? We'll talk a bit about that. Samantha, I think in general, my viewpoint is that the Democratic Party is very, very broad. I can't think of a party that's broader in at least in major countries. I can't. In terms of a party that represents such a broad ideological swath, the Democrats have to be the biggest. Most Canadian conservatives would fit in the Democrats. The most right-wing ones would be Republicans, but most would be Democrats. Pretty much every member of the Liberal Party in Canada would be Democrats. And the left wing of the Democratic Party, like AOC and the Squad, I know Bernie he's technically an independent, but he caucuses with the Democrats and he ran for president as a Democrat. Those are NDPers. So the three main Canadian parties almost entirely fit within the Democrats. The most left-wing NDPers might not sit as Democrats. They'd be a Socialist Party, DSA, or Green Party in the U.S. context. And the most right-wing conservatives in Canada might fit in the Republican Party. But it is very crazy. And so the U.S. has this two-party system, which, is like a five-party system. Because you have, three parties in the Democrats. And then you have, maybe two, maybe even three parties almost with the Republicans. You have mainstream corporate neoconservatives. You have very far-right, quasi-authoritarian types. And then you do have a few libertarians as well. And so it really does create this interesting context. I see Jason Kennedy saying, just with the black hat, Jason, thank you for your support again. Very much appreciate it. And then we have Michael Joshua Pridgeon saying Jimmy is precisely right. Progressives need to do everything they possibly can do to force a vote through on Medicare for all. At least when it fails, we'll plainly see who our enemies are. This isn't hard. We'll talk about that, Michael. I think, honestly, your argument is a reasonable one, and that's a good encapsulation of Jimmy's argument, and an argument a lot of people who I respect are making, including types like Brianna Joy Gray. I don't necessarily fully agree, and we'll kind of get into that. I do want to just go on some coat material. For those who don't know, one of the best things in the last few weeks has been to really just watch Trump supporters lose, right? To just watch them lose, because, most of my viewer base, we're not Biden fans, right? We didn't want Biden to win, except for the fact that he wasn't Donald Trump. But one of the best parts has been watching people continue to profusely deny that Donald Trump has lost, and going through all these contortions. And the latest story is that apparently, at least from time to time, Donald Trump is actually musing about throwing a tantrum and barricading himself in the White House. Now, I don't think it's going to actually happen, but CNN reported the following. In notes here, this is what CNN reported earlier today. Trump is steadfastly refusing to acknowledge he lost. In his moments of deepest denial, Trump has told some advisors that he will refuse to leave the White House on Inauguration Day, only to be walked down from that ledge. The possibility has alarmed some aides, but few believe he will actually follow through. Quote, he's throwing an effing temper tantrum, an advisor said. He's going to leave. He's just lashing out. So basically, you know, he is going to leave the White House. Like Trump is not going to be president in a few weeks, and he's going to leave. But the fact that he's considering it, right? Like the fact that he's actually saying it out loud, even like off camera, things like that, shows just how much he's like convinced himself that like some injustice has occurred or something like that. And it shows you just how like irrational Trump supporters are taking this moment. Look at one thing. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here. Michaela saying that you like my bookcase. Thank you so much. I always appreciate it. I do like my backdrop and all my books. One day, every once in a while, we kind of dig back there and talk a bit about them. Maybe we'll find time to do that tonight or on some future stream. But one thing to look into is the betting markets. Look at Betfair and Trump. Betfair is a UK betting company, basically. And it's mostly sports, right? Like a soccer game. Who's going to win? Who's going to score the game-winning goal? What's the score going to be? You could place a bet on anything. But they also take bets on politics. Like, who's going to win an election? Like, will this law pass? Will Scotland become an independent country or what have you? And they took bets on who's going to win the presidential election, right? And they, with the Electoral College formally voting a couple days ago and giving the victory to Donald Trump, excuse me, to Joe Biden, they settled those bets. And Trump supporters are freaking out, guys. Some of them are like, I bet $10,000 on Donald Trump to win, and the election isn't over yet because technically, you know, Congress could still not certify the results, and, you know, he's not president until January 20th, and I'm going to sue Betfair. And so we really are getting the depths of the Trump nation insanity, right? Like, the election's over. You can be sad it's over. You can be mad it's over. You can think that Biden's going to be awful. Like, right? Those are opinions you can have, agree or disagree with them. But the election's over, and Donald Trump has lost. But this movement is just... I've never seen anything like it, ever, in my life, ever. Like in Canada, when Stephen Harper lost, our last conservative prime minister, who had been in power for almost a decade. He became prime minister, I believe, in 2006, and was prime minister until 2015. We don't have term limits in Canada. So you could be prime minister for a few weeks or for 30 years, right? Like, he was prime minister for almost a decade. And when he lost, he came out minutes after the major networks called it and conceded. And nobody, that I could tell at least, nobody for a second suggested that he didn't actually lose or anything like that. Never seen anything like this. And like, the Republicans deserve this. They absolutely deserve it. Like, Mitch McConnell, and they all deserve it. Because I'm going to be real. Like, they created this monster, right? They created it. They were like, Trump is... during the primaries, all of these mainstream Republicans, Cruz, McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio, they were all like, Trump's dangerous. He spreads bigotry. He doesn't represent, responsible conservatism. We won't stand for him. And then when he won the primary, the argument shifted to, well, we're not happy necessarily that he's going to be our nominee, but like, he is going to be our nominee, and like, you have to elect responsible Republicans to sort of hold Donald Trump accountable. So like, when he goes to the White House, we can ensure that like, he doesn't go too far off the deep end. And of course that didn't happen. They bent over anytime Trump wanted them to bend over. And then now that Trump's on his way out, they can't even recognize the result. I mean, Mitch McConnell just recognized the result, right? He just recognized the result, but it took 6 weeks. He recognized it after 6 hours 4 years ago. And you have Kelly Loeffler, who's running in Georgia for the Senate, can't even say what's happening. Like, their messaging on Georgia is all over the place because on the one hand, they say if you don't pick Perdue and Loeffler, the Democrats win the Senate and will bring socialism to the United States. But that's only possible if you acknowledge Trump lost. Because if the Republicans do win the White House, then a 50-50 Senate, which is the best case scenario if the Democrats win both, is still a Republican Senate. Because when it's 50-50, the Senate goes to the party with the vice president. Because the vice president is the president of the Senate, and when votes are tied, he or she casts a tie-breaking vote. And so Kelly Loeffler is trying to say, oh, these are the most important Senate elections ever. And then media will be like, well, you're saying that, Senator Loeffler, because Donald Trump has lost, and because Trump has lost, because Trump has lost, you're now recognizing that the election's over. And she's like, well, no, I don't mean it like that. I just mean that these are really important. Donald Trump continues to, pursue his legal avenues, and I support him. And it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. So go like, there's a Twitter account called Coping MAGA. Go check out Coping MAGA. They are really good. It's a really good source for those sorts of things to see conservatives freak out. One more thing, people are talking about it in the chat. We mentioned it a bit last week, and I did a video on it last week, but I want to underline again that it's fantastic Nina Turner is running for Congress. I see a lot of people mentioning it. She's already put out her first, ad and statement, and it's very well done. It's got almost 1 million views on Twitter now. And she's racking up endorsements from Bernie and from many progressive members of Congress and from other progressives that were part of the Bernie movement. And they were reporting today, and I want people to maybe correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, because we were having a debate. She raised, running in a primary in Congress, not Senate, not for president, not like a statewide race in California or New York, an Ohio primary, she raised $250,000 minimum in one day. $250,000 in one day. And they said, on Twitter, the reporter said that when you factor in that some of these donations are recurring, they're not just one time, they're monthly, PAC type donations, pre-authorized donations. It could be as high as $400,000 in one day. Hello, somebody indeed, right? $400,000 in a day. It's incredible. Now, money doesn't equal votes. We know that. Right? You still need to convince people, and you still need to get the grassroots, and you still need to have local support. But money does matter. Money gets you a lot. And in a campaign where social distancing will probably still be really big, you're going to need to make sure your ads are all over local TV, local radio, target the ads on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and those sorts of things. And Nina is going to have a movement behind her that no other progressive has ever had when running for Congress. Right? AOC got endorsements. Cori Bush got endorsements. Jamal Bowman got endorsements. That matters. But they largely did it locally, kind of on their own, for the most part, right? I don't want to downplay, the national endorsements, but they kind of had to do it on their own, right? Nina does have a movement behind her. Right? Everyone talking about the donations. Guys, if you have the cash, as a Canadian, I can't donate to American politicians, but if you have the cash and it's not illegal, consider donating to Nina. There's a few reasons why. Obviously, donations matter. But like, if you're looking at a way your donation can have a real impact, giving it to local progressives running in primaries and in close races is where your donations can have the most impact. It's like, there was no point in giving money to Joe Biden. One, why would a progressive give money to Biden? But two, it's like, you're $5 to Joe Biden to buy another 20-second ad in Pennsylvania, whatever. But you give money to a local on-the-ground progressive, your $5 means a lot to them. It buys signs. It buys office space. It means a lot. So if you can, consider donating to Nina. You don't need to live in Ohio. Like, you don't need to be a citizen of the 11th district to vote there. You to vote there, to donate there. And one thing to look at, I don't know about the details yet. But do look into volunteering, right? Maybe some of you live close to where Nina's district is, in Ohio, but probably most of you don't. So look into phone banking. I'm sure they're going to set up the resources to do some phone banking and some text and online canvassing. And that's where, no matter where you are in the U.S. and probably even beyond it, at least potentially, you can support Nina Turner. Right? So I'm excited about that. And we're certainly going to talk more about Nina. We're gonna have her part of our coverage cycle as things go forward. But I'm excited to see her run. Okay, so I do want to talk a bit about the Jimmy Dore AOC story. Now, this isn't going to be about personalities. Like, I want to make that clear that, like, some people here really like Jimmy's style, his abrasiveness. And I'm not using abrasive there with a connotation. Abrasiveness can be good. People like his argumentative, abrasive style. It's very honest. It's very in your face. People like that. Some people hate that style, though. Some people don't like that, right? They want something a little bit more accessible and approachable and conciliatory and things like that. It's not going to be about how Jimmy makes his argument. That's not what I want to talk about right now. Right? But I do want to kind of have a brief discussion about this debate people have been having. Now, maybe you've heard a bit about it. I want to drop a link to my most recent video, which at least indirectly talks about this issue. So, for instance, let me pull this up here. AOC. I made this video today. This is on AOC saying we do need to get rid of Pelosi and Schumer, but the question of how is important. So again, I don't want people making this about do you like Jimmy or not. One, I'm not like a super dedicated Jimmy viewer, so like I don't feel like I'm qualified enough to judge him on a very intimate level. And on the other end, he probably has no idea who I am and has never watched a single video of mine. So there's no personal relationship there, or even a professional one, like if I was, talking about David Dole, or if I was talking about Mike Figueredo, where I've done work with those guys and at least internet friends with them, in that sense. So the basic argument from Jimmy is, and for those who don't know, just look up Jimmy Dore. I don't even need to offer you a link. He's got one of the larger left-wing political commentary channels. His argument is that this is the moment for the progressives in the House of Representatives to make an ultimatum to Nancy Pelosi and to the rest of the Democratic leadership, which is to say, we will not vote for Pelosi for Speaker unless she puts forward Medicare for all for a vote. A vote, put the legislation, put a Medicare for all bill in front of the House and have the House vote on it. Because largely, who determines what actually gets voted on? Like whether or not it's going to pass, like the agenda of the House is set by the leadership often of the major party. And so Pelosi doesn't just, get to control committees and things like that. She has a huge say on the business of the House. And so then he's saying this is a moment to force that vote. And he says that if progressives won't do it, people like AOC, but also the rest of the squad, Jayapal, Pauken, Canna, Katie Porter, like, you know, the 10 or 15, maybe not even 15, but, you know, a dozen or so progressives, Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush aren't formally there yet. They, you know, they're elected, but they won't become congresspeople until, I think, January 6th or so. They need to seize this moment and force this vote. And there's a lot of people that agree with them. AOC's perspective, though, is that it might not be the best move for a few reasons. One, at this point, the Democrats have put up their nominee and the Republicans have put up their nominee. And so it's probably either going to be Nancy Pelosi or Kevin McCarthy. And so the alternative to Pelosi is not anyone left of Pelosi. It's a literal Republican. And mind you, a Republican that supported Donald Trump's effort to overturn the election. We're not talking about we're not talking about replacing Pelosi with Jayapal or even an equivalent neoliberal. Like, the time to do this, if you were going to do this, was when the Democratic Party voted about who they were going to put up as the nominee. So in some ways that position is already passed. But the other part of the argument is that this might not be the best place to burn political capital for a couple reasons. One, you're burning significant political capital on something that likely will not improve the material standards of the working class voters the progressives are there to represent. Medicare for all 100% would be the biggest thing, or one of the biggest one or two things for the working class. 100%. That minimum wages, making it easier for workers to join a union, right up there. But the challenge from that point is that if you're just putting it up for it to be defeated, you're not actually getting anything. So what you're banking your entire congressional path on is to win a vote that you will lose. Right? That's the goal is to make your 300 style Thermopylae stand on a vote you will lose. Right? Like, that's the argument. Right? And the argument from the Jimmy Dore side, and it's not just Jimmy, there's lots of people making this argument. And I don't necessarily think it's wrong to say a vote on key legislation being a priority. I don't think that's wrong. But the argument from their side is, well, yes, we know it's going to fail because the Democrats have a bunch of phonies in the House of Representatives that don't actually represent the will of Democratic voters. Because we all know here that, 70-80% of Democrats, almost 90 actually, of Democrats support Medicare for all. Right? And the 200 and some Democrats in the House do not, for the most part, represent the ideological values of the tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Democratic voters everywhere else in the country. And I think that the argument is we can expose that discrepancy, but we can only do it with a vote. I don't know if I agree, though. I don't know if I agree. My concern, here's one of my concerns. One, I don't know if this is the best place to burn political capital. I think you need to burn it on legislative choke points. And I talk about that in my video earlier today, but we could talk about that after. But I think one big challenge here is that the vote will not tell you what you think it will tell you, or at least there's the potential that it won't. People in Congress right now can vote disingenuously. We know this. When legislation is not expected to pass, your vote doesn't necessarily matter as much as you think it does. And so, because there's enough right-wing Democrats that don't really fear a progressive challenge, and there's enough Republicans, Nancy Pelosi could likely give permission to enough Democrats that live in very blue districts, but nonetheless don't support Medicare for all, to vote for Medicare for all, knowing it will fail anyway. She will allow them to vote on it. So Pelosi could make it like, she could say, well, AOC, they pushed me to the limit. They fought me on this to the death, and I'm going to give them their Medicare for all vote. And 60 or 70 Democrats will vote for Medicare for all. The rest of them, maybe they won't. But those ones that are in the 60 and 70 will include the few actual progressives, and the rest will be people voting to stop progressives. You cannot have it both ways. This is where I think Jimmy is sort of wrong. You cannot say co-sponsoring legislation is symbolic. You cannot say that and then allow people to get real credibility off what is effectively a symbolic vote in the House. You could actually hurt progressives that way. And I'm not necessarily saying you need to not have it come up. But there are backfire potentialities here. Let's look to a narrow primary that might happen in 2022. You got some neoliberal ghoul that holds a district in New York or Chicago or LA or San Francisco or Detroit or wherever. A big city Democrat in a plus 20, 30 district that is a neoliberal ghoul. And they know there's young, progressive, hungry activists in that district. Doesn't matter that they don't support Medicare for all. But what does matter is one symbolic vote that means nothing could give them the credibility protection to stave off a primary challenge. That's the potential. Now, again, I'm not saying that's a guarantee, and I'm not saying that that's the reason why we should never bring forward legislation unless you're 100% sure it'll pass. But I'm saying that there is the potential for this to actually not have the positive effect people think it will. The most right-wing Democrats will vote against it, and they'll be safe, because the people in those districts might not want an AOC-style challenger right now. The Republicans are all going to vote against Medicare for all, and the Congress is basically 50-50. So you really need almost every single Democrat to vote for it, like barring one or two. And so that means as many as 100 Democrats in progressive districts where they are moderates could just lie to their voters without consequence. But see, they won't be exposed, Koru. That's my point. I don't think they'll be exposed. Hypothetically, you could have somebody in San Francisco that fears a progressive challenge vote yes on Medicare for all, knowing it won't pass. Remember that people will cast votes disingenuously for political purposes. Look at how the Republicans let Susan Collins vote against certain policies to help her. When they didn't need her vote, they would let her cast a vote against the Republicans. So she could look like a moderate. They would let Susan Collins do that. They would say, Susan, go ahead. We need 50 votes because Pence is the tiebreaker. We have 52. You're 53. We're going to let you make a dog and pony show about how you're making this brave stand against Donald Trump and the icky Republicans, when if the chips really were down and we needed your vote, we would get your vote. And so we win either way. We get the law passed and we get the symbolic protection for Susan Collins. And look what happened, guys. Susan Collins was able to put disingenuous votes to her purpose and run way ahead of Trump in Maine. Look at it this way. Look at another example. Who here, I want to, who here thinks AOC should consider primarying Schumer in 2022 for Senate in New York? I'm going to ask people here. I want to see what people are saying here. We're gonna take a little bit of a breather. I'm gonna drink a little bit of water, and then we're gonna talk a bit about that. Also, people, if you like the for those who haven't yet, click the like button, share this around with folks, leave a comment, helps bring it to other people. Okay, so actually some people are divided about whether she should primary here. Okay, so people are divided a little bit, but most people seem to think it's at least an okay idea. So, do you see how Schumer has been voting recently? Schumer voted with Bernie against the to cut the Pentagon budget by 10%. Schumer voted with Bernie to stop the new NAFTA, the new USMCA. Those are progressive votes. And Schumer was often one of only a few Democrats to make that vote. Do we really think Schumer is one of the 5 or 6 most progressive Democrats on key issues? I would say no. I would say Chuck Schumer is not. But if you know that the Republicans control the Senate, and right-wing Democrats like Joe Manchin will vote with the Republicans at least half the time, it seems, then you know that resisting the USMCA in the Senate won't matter. And you know that the Pentagon 10% cut is never going to pass a Republican-controlled Senate. So you can vote symbolically. And I would suggest that one of the reasons Schumer is casting those votes is not because suddenly he's become a Bernie or Markey or Markelly or even Warren-style Democrat, because those 4 are kind of consistently to the left of a lot of the mainstreamers. I would say he is doing it on purpose, specifically as potential, evidence for why it's not necessary for AOC to primary him. Now, you and I are not going to believe that. You and I are not necessarily going to believe that. We know that Chuck Schumer should still be replaced by a progressive, whether it's AOC or whether somebody else. Schumer's not the worst Democrat, but Schumer's not a senator from a purple state. If he was a purple state senator, I would say, Schumer, you're not that, maybe he's okay. But he's from one of the bluest states. Senators from the bluest states should always be very progressive. This is how the Republicans win. Their senators in red states are absolute nutters, and they can push stuff so far to the right. The Democrats, their senators in blue states are still neoliberal ghouls, right? Like, that's the reason why U.S. politics has shifted to the right. The Republicans allow their red state senators to just be crazy people, and that pushes discourse to the right. But my point is, the votes might hurt AOC's effort to stop Chuck Schumer. So my argument is, and again, I'm not necessarily saying Jimmy's wrong, and I'm not necessarily saying that AOC is right. I actually think that it's not unreasonable for a package of priorities for progressives to include actually bringing these legislative policies to the floor. But what I am saying is it really worth giving the speaker's job to Kevin McCarthy? Is it that important? Is it? And I don't know, because I don't know if it's that valuable. I really do think that unless something actually has a chance of passing, everyone's already voting tactically. Right? Like, Chuck Schumer would not vote to cut the Pentagon budget. Look, Harris didn't. Kamala Harris didn't, because I knew she was going to be VP at that moment. When Kamala Harris did not vote to cut the Pentagon budget, I remember this. I said, there's your VP pick. Because Kamala would 100% vote to cut the budget if she was just going to stay in the Senate, because she would fear left-wingers using that against her in a primary. Now that she's running for vice president, like, she doesn't want to be like it's a different game. And so I think that we have to be careful about these sorts of things. We have to be careful on these sorts of things. Now I note that in the video. Again, go check it out. It's the most recent video on the channel. I'll drop the link again. Do watch it. Not until the stream's over. No one leave this stream. No one's allowed to leave. You're all here until I'm done. But go check that video after. I think, like, look, it's like, I'm not even trying to have a fight. Like, I don't know, like Jimmy's not going to see this. I don't want him yelling at me. But, like, it's not even a fight. Like, I'm not a fighty type guy, right? I'm not a debate pro. I think that it's maybe not the biggest priority. Right? But one of the arguments I think needs to be put forward more, and I think Jimmy does at least indirectly make this point, is that this Congress is actually very interesting. Last Congress, the Democrats had a big congressional victory. And a lot of moderate Democrats won seats. This super chat has been removed by the United States government. Well, I still got the money 28 days later, 559. So, censorship bad, but thank you nonetheless. Thank you so much, 28 days later. I very much appreciate it. But so there were some new progressives like AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, but the progressives didn't hold the balance of power, right? Like, if every Republican voted against a bill and every progressive voted against it, there were enough moderate Democrats to usher most legislation through, right? There's enough to usher legislation through. And so my concern, I suppose, was then, like, AOC and the squad didn't have a whole lot of leverage last time. Unless there was a lot of, unless they could get other Democrats to join them, or Republicans were divided or something, there was very little space for them to actually force demands. This time, though, we saw this. We had this debate. We've talked about it. The progressives all won again. No progressive lost their seat. Like, there were some progressives that lost to Republican incumbents, and that's unfortunate. Like, I wish a few more of them won, like Kara Eastman and whatnot. But no progressive incumbent lost. None of them. All the Democrats that lost their seats were generally moderates, or even right-wing Democrats. Remember that no Democrat that was publicly supporting Medicare for all lost. And so, when you look at the following Congress, you have a narrower Democratic majority and a bigger progressive caucus, which gives the progressive caucus and just, you know, progressive Congress people in general more power. And I think that's where they could use it more. It's going to be hard to force the legislative agenda, but it's a lot easier for when things do come to the floor to use that block of 10, 12, 15 Congress people to actually block bad legislation from the Democrats or force modifications to it. Because again, 2 years ago, Pelosi wants to pass something in the House. She has tons of moderates to do it. She doesn't need the progressives most of the time. This time, however, unless she can get Republicans to support her, and Republicans will often block things just for the sake of it, like they're obstructionist, she's going to need progressives. And so she could put forward a bill, and if it wants to get through, she's now going to have to go to Pramila Jayapal. right? She needs to go to Pramila Jayapal because she's the chair of the Progressive Caucus and say to Pramila, I need your votes. And she's going to be like, okay, but like, we need this. Like, you want to, pass a package. We need it to be bigger. We need it to include better language for workers. We need it to include better language for women. We need it to include more accountability, say, for police or what have you. And if you give us that, we will give you our votes. And in a way that they couldn't before, they're not as cohesive as they need to be. But the Progressive Caucus can, in a way, act like a third party in a minority parliament. Like, it only applies to the House because the Senate is going to be razor thin, and there's no Progressive Caucus like there is. I mean, there's Bernie and a few other people that are not always awful, but like the Senate's different. But they could really modify a lot of the legislation that goes through the House. And that's where I think they could exercise power. That's my viewpoint. It's not as sexy as getting rid of Pelosi as chair or speaker, and it's not as momentous as bringing forward Medicare for all for a floor vote and those sorts of things. I know it isn't, but it is nonetheless important. So I don't know. If for those who are regular Jimmy viewers, let me know how he would respond to my argument, you think. I think, I didn't want to make it about personalities, and I tried to offer my case. I'd love to know what people think. Let me know, things like that. One thing, while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to read Joseph's chat, but Dave Grissom at the Michael Brooks show and through his own projects has said that one of the things they do for their live chats is for their Patreons, they can write questions in advance for live streams. One thing I do is I do read comments, but I like to focus on the super chats and stuff because, the people are chipping a little bit of money in to support the channel, and I want to make sure their voices get heard. But I also want to give my patrons who give money every month to have the same opportunity to get questions in, and maybe that gives them time to write out a bit of a longer question or to think about how they want to word a question. So let me know if you guys would like that, and maybe for the next stream, probably not next week because it's going to be awfully close to Christmas, but maybe for like the 30th, maybe we can do something like that where I'll do a question segment based off Patreon questions that people sent in advance. And that'll be available to all tiers. Even the $1 patrons will be able to do that. So let me know if people would like that. It would give us a lot more questions to talk about and be a little bit more flexible for folks. And for those who can't watch it live, they could have their questions still read and then watch it back later. Joseph says, what do you think about the proposed stimulus relief package in the U.S.? No, we haven't talked about the NDP yet. We're gonna get into that. The package is getting a little bit better in some ways, but I'm not happy with it. No, I'm glad that because of Bernie and Josh Hawley, who is generally awful, but to his credit, they've fought to get some kind of direct money in. But from what I've heard most recently, it is 600. Is it 600? That's not enough. And I've heard some Republicans say that they want the 600. They want the 600 to be exclusive from the unemployment benefit. So the unemployment, the $300 unemployment supplement, whatever it ends up being, they want it so that you can't get both. Like under the original deal, everyone got the, like not everyone, but most people got the $1,200. And then if you were eligible, you got the EI or the UI supplement. Canada, we call it EI, sorry. But the UI supplement. This time they want to make it at least some Republicans so you can't get both. So I would probably still tell people to vote no. My baseline for me, if I was a senator or a congressman, and I am not, would be three things. One, no liability shield. No liability shield for corporations, none. So that they, because so they're not given legal immunity for setting up unsafe workspaces and for their workers and customers. Two, the maintenance of the unemployment benefit, preferably at the 600, but maybe you could sacrifice a bit there, but above 300, I would say. So maybe you could find some way to keep it at 450, 500, whatever. But the maintenance of the UI subsidy. And three, a universal payment. I would want it to be monthly for the next few months or what have you, but of at least $1,200, at least $1,000. Like, that would be my move. Like, you have to negotiate a little bit, and I'm sure that, if you could get no liability shield, 400 unemployment, and $1,000 cash, I'd probably take that deal. But I wouldn't take a deal that pits unemployment against the stimulus, that pits workers against one another. It's a bad move, and the U.S. government has the means, if it makes the priority, to give everybody both UI and a universal stimulus. Right? So that's my view. So in some ways the deal has gotten better, because before there was no talk of any direct stimulus. And so the fact that that's on the table is good, because getting something on the table is the hardest part. Like, if you can get 600, it's a lot easier to bargain someone up to 800, 900, whatever, than it is to get it on the table in the first place. But, I don't know. Well, here's the thing about Canada. It was 2,000, yes, but we didn't have a direct stimulus payment, and a lot of people got left out of that 2,000. Our system was still better, but don't necessarily think the Canadian system was perfect. The very poorest Canadians got nothing. Literally not 1 cent. Some provinces they did, but the poorest Canadians got nothing. The point is, though, I would suggest that I would need to see something a little bit better, but I think that there is a sign that Bernie and others have actually made a good contribution in this debate. Like, I don't know. I mean, that's my viewpoint. It should the US has the ability to give more. Like, the US has the ability to give more than 600 and more than 2,000 or more than 1,200. They do. They really do. But the political makeup of Congress, the House and the Senate, is way more conservative than the viewpoints of the actual people. And so I think that fighting for those three planks and getting something decent has to be the priority. So I want to talk a little bit about Biden, and then we'll do some Canada talk. Biden is not off to a good start, guys. I gotta say. Well, here's the thing. Before I'll come back to that. The CERB in Canada, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, was $2,000 a month for a few months. It's sort of wrapped up now, not fully, but it's kind of wound down. And it was available if you lost. At first, you needed to lose your full job and not have any income. Eventually, they scaled it so you could make up to $1,000 a month. Like, let's say you had to work multiple jobs and you lost all but 5 hours of work a week. You weren't forced to choose between your job and the $2,000 a month. You had to have lost your job. You couldn't quit your job and get it. And crucially, you had to have had a job when the benefit came down, and you needed to have earned $5,000 over the previous 12 months. So, for instance, if you were a young person that got their first job, lost your job, and then hadn't had enough time yet to make $5,000, and keep in mind, in most provinces in Canada, the minimum wage is 10 or 11, 12 bucks an hour. It's better than the US, obviously, but it's not like only one province has $15 right now, and only another one is moving towards it. The fact of the matter is, you might not have had enough time yet to earn $5,000. So a lot of the most vulnerable people didn't get anything. Right? So a lot of people didn't get it. And I know the US, like the $1,200 check, a lot of vulnerable people didn't get it for a variety of reasons, like people fell through the cracks. But the Canadian system was actually designed explicitly to exclude the poorest. Everybody else could get it if you lost your job or most of your income. But if you were the poorest Canadians, the government basically told you to F off. The NDP, the party I support, Jagmeet Singh's party, the guy who did the Among Us stream with AOC, that's the NDP, and kind of the party that Bernie would be in and stuff. We just said, hey, anybody who needs the money should get it. If like really rich people sign up for it, we'll tax it back off of them at the end. But like right now is not the time to worry about exactly who needs help. People need help. $2,000 a month to anyone who needs it, no questions, and we'll figure it out later in terms of taxation and whatnot. But basically, we said give it to the poorest, neediest people, and we'll figure it out later. And I think that was the best strategy to do it. And instead, the Liberals created this mess of a system. And now, because their system was a mess, like Canadians are finding out that they didn't make enough money, so technically they weren't eligible. So you have really poor people now owing the federal government $6,000 or whatever, which is like a huge amount of money. So, yeah, it's not great. It's not great, guys. I gotta tell you. Our system is better than the U.S., but it's not great. A lot of people were left out, and it's not great. One thing I think we kind of need to talk about is Biden, guys. Gotta talk about Biden. It's not a great start. Pete Buttigieg as transportation secretary is ridiculous, guys. It's ridiculous. It's inexcusable. Absolutely inexcusable. Silver Princess says, libertarian here. Take it from me, you gain absolutely nothing if you settle with good enough. The squad needs to stick to their principles, period. I mean, thank you for the support, Silver Princess. And I think that's a great point. I think principles are incredibly important. That doesn't necessarily preclude strategy, but I think you're right. I think that you do need to negotiate from a position of strength. And I think that one of the limitations of is that when you already compromise, your opponent is not going to treat you as reasonable and agree with you. They're going to push on their end too. So I think it is fair to say that you go in with a big demand, knowing that you're going to get fought on it to achieve something, rather than meet your opponent halfway before they've moved at all. And I think that's very fair. So, Pete Buttigieg as transportation secretary, guys, is bad. It's a bad pick. It really is troubling. Look, you guys know me and most Bernie supporters. We were not a fan of Peter Buttigieg. We were not. His smarminess, like most people that are young people saw through Pete Buttigieg. Young people did not like Pete Buttigieg. Just totally disingenuous. Here in Canada, he's most famous in Canada for helping the biggest grocery chain in Canada screw poor Canadians out of the bread that fed their children by fixing bread prices. The company got caught, knew they were about to get caught, so they gave Canadians like tens of millions of dollars of grocery coupons. So think about it. If they were willing to give away tens of millions of dollars to Canadians for bread price fixing, how much did they make off bread price fixing? Think about it that way. They gave away dozens of millions in grocery coupons, probably because they stole hundreds of millions from Canadians in bread price fixing. And Buttigieg did not design the system, but when he worked at McKinsey, he worked for them in trying to set up their prices. You are never going to convince me that Buttigieg was not playing a role in taking food out of low-income Canadians' mouths and getting paid handsomely to do so. Look, I get rewarding Pete Buttigieg. Look, I don't agree with it, but I get it. Right? He was one of the top candidates in the race. He was ahead of Joe Biden when he dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden. Right? Like, you know, he didn't win Iowa. I don't care what but he came very close to winning Iowa, and he came close to beating Bernie in New Hampshire. Like, Pete Buttigieg had like a good early primary. And he raised a lot of money and all these sorts of things. And his endorsement came at a good time for Joe Biden. I get rewarding him, but making him transportation secretary, it's ridiculous. Yeah. It's ridiculous. Right? Yeah, literally, like bread, the price of bread, like even historically, going back to medieval times, like the price of bread was sacrosanct, the validity of bread, because bread was a sustainer. Like bakers that cheated people on bread, it was like a big crime. The reason you have a baker's dozen, you guys know what a baker's dozen is, right? It's when you get the 13th like donut or whatever. It's because bakers knew that if they shortchanged someone, even unintentionally, they could be in huge trouble. So they always just gave a little bit more to be safe, because nothing pissed off the peasants like getting screwed on bread. And we have Rat Boy over here screwing Canadians on bread. Samurai Jack says, bonjour, comment ça va? Ça va bien. Samurai Jack, ça va bien. It's as good as it can be, given everything in the world. But like, look, Pete Buttigieg does not have experience as a transportations person. He was a very small town, not a small town. He was a small city mayor, and he didn't do a whole lot with transit there. Insofar as he did transit, it actually led to a person losing their life due to his transit reforms. It's not a city with a really big bus and public transit network. It's not like he was mayor of New York or Chicago or LA or Atlanta or whatever. Right? You know? Look, and when I say he deserves to be rewarded, I'm not saying I think, like, it would be wrong for him to be in cabinet. I say I understand that the game of politics, like, it's what you would expect. We knew Pete was going to get paid, somehow. We knew it. Like, we knew it. We knew he was going to get paid. I think, for instance, making him the head of the VA would make more sense because he is a veteran. Things like that. Like, well, look, here's the thing. Rahm Emanuel has no place in cabinet. None. Whatsoever. No place in cabinet. For what he did to Laquan McDonald and for being a right-wing neoliberal ghoul. But at the very least, you can say that when he was a mayor of one of the biggest cities in the world. And that city with a big, complex transit network. You could say whether he did a good job with it or not, but you can make an argument that he does have more transit-based experience than Pete Buttigieg. Karen Sita says, "Oh, such a cute accent when speaking French." Thank you, Karen, so much for the support. I'm glad you like that. But like, yeah, and Nathan, that's a good point. I don't think it's as much as 200. It's the third. I read somewhere it's the 306th largest city apparently in the United States. I heard it was in the. Let me look. South Bend. South Bend has a population of 102,000. It is, according to the Wikipedia, it is part of a broader metro area that includes other cities, and that's in the 152nd biggest metro area. But that is, where is that? Yeah, that's part of the broad South Bend, Elkhart, Mishawaka area in like Indiana, Michigan area, but it is not necessarily his area. He only governed that portion of it, South Bend, which is smaller than where I live in Kingston, Ontario. My point, though, is that he doesn't have a lot of experience with transit. Even Trump has cronies, but Elaine Chao, his current transit secretary, yeah, she probably got the job in part because she's Mitch McConnell's wife, but like she worked in the transit department in the 80s. Like, she's got a long history of working in transit administration in various capacities. Pete Buttigieg has not. Like, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And look, like, there is not a single Bernie person in this cabinet. There's none. There are some people that are not bad. There are some people that are okay. Like, there are some picks that are decent. But, like, there are no actual progressives in this cabinet. Maybe they're going to pull a rabbit out of a hat. But there's none right now. None. And then you have Biden. You guys saw my video. If you haven't seen it yet, you can go check it out. But I made a video... on this. When did I make that? Just a few days ago, where Biden is basically telling Al Sharpton and other civil rights leaders to basically shut up so he can basically like continue to try to win over moderates. And Joe Biden saying he's done more for black people than even black civil rights leaders, and saying to black people, black leaders, that were instrumental in his victory, because it wasn't John Kasich who delivered anything, or the Lincoln Project. It was the left, it was young people, and it was people of color. They delivered Biden's victory. And so you got black civil rights leaders. basically saying, Joe, like, you need to do more for us. And Joe's like, nah, I've done more than anybody. And if you don't like it, the hell with you. Like, it's unacceptable. It's disrespectful to talk to some of the people in that room who are icons. But it's awful. Like, look, I have no expectations for Biden. My argument all along was Biden's going to suck, but, like, Trump's even worse. And so, like, let's get ready to fight Biden. But, like, my bar was microscopically low, and he might even be unable to clear that. Yeah, the housing and human services, Becerra, I think it is, he's not bad. I've seen some people say there are some good picks. And I believe he's at least a partial supporter of Medicare for all. He's at least lukewarm. But there's nobody from the Bernie movement. There's nobody from the Bernie movement. There's nobody from that portion of the spectrum. Like somebody that was out and out a Bernie supporter. And look, I get it. I think it would be cool if Bernie was labor secretary. I actually don't fully agree, though, because I think we need Bernie in the Senate to be an independent voice. If you're in cabinet, you sort of like get taken out of the spotlight and you don't get to actually criticize the government. And I think you need Bernie doing that. But I do think he would also be a good labor secretary. But that just because it can't be Bernie because the Senate is so precarious right now doesn't mean you couldn't pick somebody like Bernie. And that's where I think, like, the left has been utterly excluded. And we remember this. Back in 2016, no one worked harder for Hillary than Bernie. There were times where Bernie worked harder for Hillary than Hillary did for Hillary. And in this election, Bernie Sanders, who is 79 years old now, I believe, 78, 79 years old, was doing in-person events for Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders putting his life on the line to defeat Donald Trump because Bernie believed that much in Donald Trump's danger to democracy. And Bernie turned out to be right. Bernie turned out to be 100% right of Donald Trump's willingness to basically tear democracy down if he felt it would serve him. And there's nothing for the Bernie movement. People saying I want to ban beer. Well, there's somebody who's like on Twitter, was like, what's your favorite controversial take? And I said that I don't like, all beer is gross. But you can continue to drink gross beer. If you want to do that, that's your choice. No prohibition. I won't judge you for your awful taste. Yeah, it is a little chilly here in Kingston. It is kind of a minus 15 or so here, too. Somebody's saying Jimmy is live again. We'll see. We'll see what he I don't know. Like, again, when I get involved in some of these like YouTube drama debates, I don't know, because people don't know me, right? Like Jimmy Dore doesn't know who I am. Like the Young Turks people don't know who I am. Maybe some of the people at the Majority Report know who I am, but I don't know if Sam Cedar knows who I am. So it's like, I don't know, like, if like I'm ever part of the drama wave in that sense. Well, yeah, Shays is saying, like, Biden, it was offensive how he was talking to those civil rights leaders. I think that's fair. Look, some of those civil rights leaders are neoliberals. They are. And, like, they backed Biden in part to stop Bernie. But, like, they did back Biden, and they worked hard for him. And the African-American community worked incredibly hard for Joe Biden in the primary and after it. Like, they did. Where was Pete Buttigieg? He did a few Fox News things that no one cared about that flipped exactly 0 voters. If anything, pissed off people because Pete Buttigieg comes off like a smarmy SOB. Meanwhile, black organizers are pulling the vote everywhere and the left is pulling the vote everywhere. Yeah. Oh yeah, Humanist Report knows who I. Yeah, Mike's great. Mike's fantastic. He's been super supportive. A lot of you found me the one time that I subbed in for him, just after the Super Tuesday, but no. Well, see, people are interesting about the David Sirota thing, but like my interpretation is that he and Jimmy actually agree on this. I think David Sirota's position was Jimmy is like forced to vote on Medicare for all, and David Sirota was less like Jimmy, you're wrong, and more like yes, but also let's do these additional things. And so I actually think that they agreed more than maybe like Jimmy felt. Like maybe Jimmy felt there was more of a disagreement there than there actually was. I don't know. That's my interpretation of their meeting. Like I actually don't think it needed to be combative. Like even disagreements don't need to be combative, but it really seems like they were at least like on the same half page together. Like they were half on the same page. So a couple things. I want to shift a little bit to talk about Erin O'Toole because this is really bad stuff here. So Press Progress is one of Canada's go-to sources for like left-wing commentary and exposing conservative and neoliberal BS. Oh yeah, Biden absolutely hates being questioned. That's a great point. Sekmara, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Apologies if not. Going back to the primaries. Do you guys remember when he would get any question at all, and he would either call you fat, challenge you to a push-up contest, or like say go vote for Donald Trump or go vote for Bernie or whatever. And then I do remember that. He does not like being questioned. So that's Press Progress. For those who are if you haven't heard of Press Progress, go to that. But even for Americans, if you want like it like an accessible, quick site that kind of tells you about like what crazy things conservatives and liberals are doing in Canada from a left wing, from like a democratic socialist perspective, this is a good site. This is a good site. And this story that I sent you is a particularly important one. So I'll set this for those who don't know Canadian politics all that well. We've talked a bit about it before, but I'll set the stage for like the broad spectrum. In general, federally, we have 5 parties that actually have the amount of votes needed to win seats. You have the NDP, which is the leftmost party, center-left, left-wing, which is the party I support and, the historic party of the left in Canada. Then you have the Green Party, which is sort of more centrist, in between the Liberals and the NDP. On some issues, they're more left-wing. On some issues, they're more conservative. But I would say they're centrist to center-left. Then you have the Liberal Party, which is center-right, depending on the issue. They're the current governing party. That's Justin Trudeau's party. Think of the corporate Democrats. That's them. They're not always wrong, but they're rarely right, if you know what I mean. And then you have the Conservative Party, which is not as right-wing as the U.S. Republicans. In general, you might say they're a mishmash of the most moderate Republicans and the most conservative Democrats, is a good way to typify them. Like, they'd kind of be a party that if the Democrats and Republicans, the middles of those parties were to merge, they would be like the Canadian Conservatives. And then you also have the Bloc Québécois, which is a Quebec party, which on some issues is left-wing, mostly economics, but not always. And on some social issues, they're right-wing, but not always, right? They're pro-feminism, but they're generally not progressive on minority rights. and they support social programs, but they often oppose things like wealth taxes. And so in general, the second largest party is the Conservative Party right now. And their leader came out and defended the residential schools. Now, I don't know if you know what residential schools are, but in essence, in Canadian history, you guys had this too. But we're going to talk about this, though. People saying about Brianna. People saying Brianna. Not Brianna, my wife, Brianna, but Brianna Joy Gray. Bernie's former communications director. Who I think agrees with Jimmy more on this issue. She's largely taken Jimmy's vision of that debate, which she thinks that the Democrats should try, or the progressives should try and force the vote. See, Nathan, you call them social democrats who are xenophobic to a degree, but don't forget they did not vote with the NDP on a wealth tax even. So I don't even know what their credentials are for redistributive taxation. I think they've become much more neoliberal under Blanchet. They're probably to the right of the Liberals on a lot of issues now, or at least similar to the Liberal Party. But I'm just gonna. I just put the person saying Insurrection Act in timeout. Please don't spam. If you want to suggest something like that, you're welcome to. But one, I don't think you'll find receptive people here. But also, it just clogs the chat. But basically, the Conservative Party defended residential schools. Now, if you don't know what residential schools are, you have to go all the way back to the earliest days of Canada, right? And this is going to be a pretty tricky discussion because they are a dark part of Canadian history. So, much like in the US, there were millions of people who lived in Canada before Europeans ever came. Like the Indigenous people. We call them collectively Indigenous people. You know, there are specific names. There are Inuit peoples. There are Mi'kmaq peoples. There are Algonquin peoples. There are Coast Salish peoples. But like we have one catch-all term in general, Indigenous peoples. And in the earliest days of Canada, the federal government, in partnership with the Catholic Church and the Church of England, I believe, created something called residential schools. And the basic premise was Indigenous parents were forced to send their children to these schools, where the children would ostensibly be educated, but in reality, it was a tool to destroy their cultures. It was a tool to prevent them from speaking their own languages. It was a tool from preventing them from learning their own traditional and spiritual practices. It was, in general, a tool to sort of sever the link between generations. That you would take these Indigenous children and make them culturally European. And these schools were formed for the first time in the 1850s and 1860s, but they ran until the 1990s. We've talked like, if I was in school, I didn't go to one because I'm a European Canadian, but I was in grade school when residential schools were still open. Like I'm born in 1987. I started school, therefore, in about like 92 or so. And it was a few years after that, there were still residential schools in Canada. And so these are, and were maybe the key tool the Canadian government used for the entire history of Canada almost. It's only the last 20 years and more. They haven't used them. To systematically destroy Indigenous culture. It's one of the darkest moments of Canadian history. I think you guys had some of these too in the U.S. Like, I think that some Native Americans, they had schools like this, but I think it was a wider spread cultural practice in Canada. Right? Nicholas, you asked me my thoughts on Trudeau. I mean, I literally, and I'm not trying to brag, but I literally wrote the book. It's right here. This is my PhD dissertation in book form. The Constant Liberal, Pierre Trudeau, Organized Labor, and the Canadian Social Democratic Left. Check this book out. I literally wrote the book. My argument is that I write a critical book of Trudeau from the left. My argument is that Trudeau was the founder of Canadian neoliberalism and made a lot of the attacks on the welfare state and on unions and on the working class possible in a way that even Brian Mulroney didn't play the same role as. So I make a left-wing critical challenge of him. So I guess you might say I'm not a fan. So I didn't mean to flex there. I just thought it was probably the most efficient way to do that. So Pranay says, last residential school closed in 96. I graduated 2 years before the last one closed. So, in essence, it's one of the darkest things in Canadian history. Literally no reasonable person would say otherwise. And so Q, the leader of the Conservative Party, again, I posted that link in the description. The leader of the Conservative Party did a live stream with campus conservatives at Ryerson University. And the guy who was named, that they named the university after, played a role in this ugly system. And so he said the following. When Egerton Ryerson was called in by Hector Langevin and people it was meant to try and provide education, it became a horrible program that really harmed people, but we're not helping anybody by misrepresenting the past. And so the narrative from Erin O'Toole, again, the leader of the opposition and the leader of the Conservative Party, is that they meant well with the residential schools. And that is a lie. We know that's not true. The goal was clear. They said, the founder of residential schools said, the goal is to kill the Indian in the child. To erase their identity, their being, their history, their lineage. Everything about them. And to basically install whiteness, like intellectually, culturally within them. Like, it's absurd, guys. It is absolutely absurd. It's one of the most ridiculous things a major Canadian politician has said in a long time. People saying, what am I? I call myself a democratic socialist. But I honestly, I don't make a huge distinction between social democratic and democratic socialist. I actually think that, like, anybody who puts too much stock between those two, like, in my historical readings, people use the terms interchangeably. Yeah. That's Erin O'Toole. That's what he said. We know this. We know the schools were designed with the express purpose of, like, destroying Indigenous culture. That's why they were designed. Like, insofar as they provided education, the education was predicated on that. So, I don't know. It's absolutely awful. Absolutely awful, guys. Like, that's like I don't want to draw too much of a hyperbole, but that really is like someone defending, like, slavery. And then saying, oh, the people who did it, yeah, it turned out bad, but the original intent was to educate and civilize. Like, that was the argument that a lot of, that people made back in the day. But imagine saying in 2020 that, like, and arguing that. That's what Erin O'Toole did. That's what he did. So, a lot of people saying he literally has Tool in his name. What else do you expect? Yeah, I mean, he's certainly on brand with his name today, at least. Right? You know. So, I do find it interesting here. People come here and they say Biden crime family going down. Look, I want to make things perfectly clear. I do not like Joe Biden. I don't want Joe Biden to be president. It's just that it was going to be Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Right? But if we're let's be clear here. There's a few distinctions. One, and let's be clear, the accusations against Joe Biden by Tara Reade, I think, are credible. But there's just as many accusations against Donald Trump. And let's also be clear that, one, I don't give a single damn about Hunter Biden. I don't care. I don't care. But the thing is, Joe Biden is not giving Hunter Biden a job in his administration. Donald Trump made his children and his in-laws, his children's partners, key cogs in his administration. Kushner, Ivanka, Eric and Laura and Don Jr., they all in some were either staffers in his White House or on his campaign or both. There is no comparison. I do not care about Hunter Biden. I don't care. I want Biden to go down because he's an awful ideological person. I do not care about Hunter Biden. I don't think there's enough of a story there for me to care at all. But I'll tell you one thing. I would care more if, for instance, Joe Biden made Hunter Biden a chief advisor in his White House. Children should generally not be fair game in politics. They shouldn't be. But when you make those children top White House officials, they are. So yes, you might think as a conservative it's hypocritical, but it's not. Ivanka and Don Jr. and Laura and Eric and Jared should be held to a higher standard than Hunter because Joe Biden is not giving Hunter a job right now. He's not doing it. You could say, oh, well, he only got the job at Burisma because his dad is, yeah, probably. But call me when Hunter Biden is, a member of cabinet. And then I'll give a damn. Yeah, you could say that though, as his collection agent. Look, Trump literally gave his kids jobs in the freaking White House. There is no comparison there. There's no comparison. I hate defending Biden. Guys, it tears at my soul to defend Joe Biden. It tears at it. But I just don't think it's a story. Certainly no Bernie-style progressives. Look, most politicians get their kids jobs through nepotism, either directly or indirectly. Bernie's a rare exception. I think Bernie didn't even endorse his son when he ran for office because Bernie didn't want to have any accusations of nepotism. But look, here in Canada even, and I think it's a great family, but look, David Lewis was a founder of the NDP, CCF NDP. And then his son, Stephen Lewis, became leader of the Ontario NDP. And then his son, Avi Lewis, is a major figure on the Canadian left, married to Naomi Klein, another major figure on the Canadian left. If you don't think that even among the left, some of our most cherished people use their connections, even if subconsciously, to get advantages over people that don't have them, I don't know what to tell you. Nepotism is pan-ideological. Might not be equally pan-ideological, but it is pan-ideological. People with famous parents are more likely, even if it's not to make money, like on the left, it's not to make money necessarily, but there are a lot of MPs in Canada, even in left-wing parties, who were the children of MPs or MPPs or mayors or what have you. Nepotism exists. Another good thing, some good news. I want to talk about some good news. Couple things. One, there's a new poll that has the NDP at 23% in Canada, which is massive news. Only 6 points behind the Conservatives. That's great to see. Nepotism isn't a crime. No, it's not a crime. But, well, it can be potentially. It depends how it's done. But no, in general, it's not. But it is, it's something that, look, in Canada, you can have examples of it. Look, and it's not even always like direct, but like, look, Jack Layton, former NDP leader, beloved. His dad was a major politician. Justin Trudeau, his dad was prime minister. Like a lot of these people, not everybody, but a lot of these people have family connections that like make it easier to get into politics. Right? So yeah, a couple of things of good news. One, the NDP has pulled its highest it has in years, actually, at 23. And so in Canada, I can bring up that poll. Let me see. Let me bring up polling. Okay, so if you go to Polling Canada, the most recent Canadian poll has the NDP at 23. And so this poll has the Liberal Party at 35%. That's the current governing party. The Conservatives at 29. The NDP at 23. The Bloc at 7. They only contest seats in Quebec. So that 7 is actually it's worth more because it's concentrated in one province. And then you have the Green Party at 5%. And so this is the best the NDP has polled in a long time. It includes the NDP polling first in British Columbia, which is the third biggest province in Canada. And it also includes the NDP polling first among voters 18 to 34. Right? And then, as Craig is noting, the NDP has been able to retire its campaign debt. One of the challenges is that after 2015, the NDP ran a very, very big money campaign, but finished in a distant third because Tom Mulcair ran an awful campaign. And so the party got into this really big debt trap, and it was so big that they carried a lot of that debt into the 2019 election. But, afterwards, Singh has been able to increase the amount of fundraising, and they've done a good job at the office cutting costs. And they've been able to retire like $10 million of debt. And $10 million is a lot in Canadian politics. Like, Canadian politics isn't as big money as US politics. Right? So it's a big deal. That means that the party will have more money going into an election, which is likely going to be next year. Probably in the spring, I would say. It's going to depend, I think, on where the Liberals are polling. It's also going to depend on the effectiveness of a vaccine. If vaccines are being rolled out and they're very effective, the Liberals will likely gain a popularity boost and will feel like they'll be less punished for calling an election. And so I think that with the NDP polling strongly and with they're having less debt, they'll be much better able to contest an election. And unlike in the last election where very few people knew who Jagmeet Singh was, many more people know who he is now, and he's the most popular leader in Canada. Oh, people might be hearing some noise. It's either my heater, which it's cold today, so it's been on for a lot of the stream. So apologies. But also you're probably hearing Smokey. Who is often a guest on the stream. Don't worry, he has been fed. I did feed him. Smokey's trying to tell you guys, he doesn't feed me. Get me food. Come rescue me. But no, I did feed him, and I will feed him when the stream is done. Wait, I'm gonna go. People want to see Smokey. I'm gonna go get him. We're gonna get you some food after. Okay. Here we go. Everyone say hi to Smokey. Everyone say hi. You want to say hi? Smokey is hungry, yes. Smokey is hungry. Although I don't know how hungry he actually is. Or if he just knows that I'm on camera, and so therefore public relations dictate that I give him extra food, lest I get canceled by the internet for being a bad cat owner. So I don't know. Okay, did you want to go sit over there, Smokey, or did you want to go down? Okay, so he's camera shy today. Smokey's quite old now. He's probably. We adopted him kind of like off Kijiji. Like we didn't, like somebody was just getting rid of their cat and like, you know, we wanted to like take him. So we don't have like an exact sense, but he was about 3 or 4, they said, when we got him. And that was about 10 years ago now. So he's like 13, 14. So he's not like super old, but he's not a young cat either. But he's still pretty healthy for the most part, right? So we're very lucky. Karen Sita. Smokey, it's not true. I need food now. Karen, I mean, thank you for the support. And thank you for speaking up for Smokey. I almost named my cat. Well, it is a very common cat name. It's just his fur kind of has a smoke pattern to it. So we kind of felt it was a very fitting name. Dark Knight says, Smokey is pretty. I lost my similar looking cat last month. He's out there but won't come home. Well, that Dark Knight, apologies about that. I hope they do come home. My in-laws actually, and they lived like in the woods almost. Like literally kind of out in like the forest almost. They had a cat run away. This was years ago now. But they had a cat run away into the woods, and they just assumed that it like went into nature or maybe got eaten or whatever. But like 3 months later, it came back. Like literally 3 months. So honestly, like, you know, maybe they could still come back. I hope they do. I hope they do. If they do come back, let us know. We'll all pray that they do. So people are asking for news sources for Canada. One on YouTube. Go check out David Dole. He's great. Other good Canadian YouTubers that don't always do news necessarily. You got Step Back History. You got Mexi. You have smaller YouTubers like Waffle to the Left and What's Bothering Me Today. Some of those channels are smaller, but you know, everyone starts somewhere. In terms of written media, Our Times Magazine, Canadian Dimension, Ricochet, rankandfile.ca, Briarpatch Magazine, Press Progress is a good source. Ironic as it is, you'll find good Canadian writing sometimes in the Washington Post. And that sounds weird, but some of they publish good Canadian commentary in the Washington Post. Sometimes I've published there a few times. Jacobin will have good articles on Canada. Not enough, I think, but like I've written for Jacobin. They're pretty good. What else is a good Canadian news source? Podcasts. There's a good amount of podcasts. Rob Russo's got a good podcast. Alberta Advantage is pretty good. They mostly focus on Alberta stuff, obviously, but not exclusively. What else? People, and those are like, what else is some good sources? I mean, those are like some of the best. Some of Canada Land stuff is good. A lot of it is like really neoliberal, but some of like their podcast on Thunder Bay was fantastic. They do some good stuff every now and then. So, you know, those are some of the good sources. In general, check out the Harbinger Media Network. Let me see. It's a good catch-all for podcasts. They're new. A lot of the podcasts aren't new necessarily, but they are, but they formed a new network. So do check out Harbinger. See, Canada Land Maine is neoliberal, and their politics show is like, they're not necessarily on the left. Like, their show is like a center-right person and a right-wing person, and it's like, and Jesse Brown is more like a libertarian than a progressive. But they do have some good podcasts, when they cover certain issues that I think are important. So Canada Land is more hit and miss. Sandy and Nora is a good example. Thank you for reminding me. I haven't talked about them. Harbinger Media Network is a new media network. It includes a lot of the shows I mentioned, like Alberta Advantage, 49th Parahell, Radio Free Winnipeg. A lot of these are good Canadian podcasts, all from the left. Not always like from the same tendency. Some are more social democrat, some are more radical, but they are all left-wing podcasts, and they are it's a good source covering stuff from the left in Canada, and it's kind of like a podcast network. Progress Report for Alberta, and then what else? I was gonna say, yes, Sandy and Nora is good too. Those are all really good sources, and of course on YouTube you have lots of good sources just in general. Like people that I watch, if you want, like people that I watch, I like David Dole, obviously, Mike Figueredo at the Humanist Report. The Surfs are a good one. Go check out the Surfs. They have a YouTube channel, but they're also on Twitch. The Surfs are really good. Lance at the Surfs is a friend of both of the Surfs, but like I know Lance especially well. They're good friends of the show. Who else is good? I do watch Vosh. He's pretty good. Don't always agree with everybody on the list, of course, all the time, but they offer good commentary. Of course, and you have like the big dogs, like the Majority Report and Young Turks and things like that. You know, you check in every now and then. David Pakman, David Pakman is okay. Still his Bolivia take, guys, is something that I haven't gotten over. His defense of the coup against Morales is something that I think he has not reckoned with. Likewise, his criticism of a YouTube union, unless it only included big channels like his, I think is explicitly anti-solidarity. So I've never really been in touch with David Pakman, but I actually don't necessarily think I fully see him ideologically in like the broad camp that, say, myself, David Dole, Mike Figueredo, Kyle Kalinske, and these types, Sam Cedar, are in. I think he's a bit more of a lib. It doesn't mean his coverage isn't great, but I wouldn't necessarily consider Pakman's channel a left-wing channel in the same way. Right? I'm not saying don't watch David Pakman. I'm saying that, like, I don't know. A couple things. I made a video critical of him with the union. If you guys want to watch it, let me see. This is an old video. You're going to see just how bad go check it out. You're going to see how bad my camera is and my mic is. It's not great, but you can see it there, and you'll get a good sense. So people ask me, now I'm just going to get in trouble here. Here's the problem with Rising. Crystal Ball is fine. It's the nature of the program that I think has limitations. Crystal Ball, when it's Crystal Ball, I think is actually pretty good. Sagar is like a wannabe Tucker Carlson. Like, he wants to be, literally. Like, his hope is to one day be Tucker Carlson. he's been on Tucker a lot. I think he like actually tries to be like a Tucker style person. The nature of their show, the way it works is, and it worked during the Democratic primary, but it doesn't work in a general election, because the way it works basically is Crystal Ball is there to criticize the limitations of the Democratic Party. And I think she does so generally well and generally in good faith. Then Sagar sort of does that to the right, but not to the same degree. And so I think what you get is somebody who defends a certain type of right-wing ideology and someone who is mostly there to criticize the mainstream Democrats. And you get less of a criticism of the mainstream Republicans on that show. So it's mostly mainstream Democrats are bad, the show, which is true, but I think the intent of it is to hurt the Democratic Party, but not hurt the Republican Party. And so it's the nature of Rising as a production where I think Crystal gets into the weeds, and it doesn't really have as much to do with her ideologically. When she is doing work on her own, like when she, during the primary, when she would be on MSNBC as like a Bernie surrogate, she was fantastic. She's a great media voice, and very talented, very sharp, very concise. But I think it's the nature of Rising as a show. Like, look, like Rise, like there's good, like they have good guests on Rise. Like some of like they have Ryan Grimm on a lot. I have a lot of respect for Ryan Grimm. His reporting's fantastic. They do cover stories that the mainstream media will not cover, and that's important. Like Rising and Katie Halper, and I'll throw myself in there a little bit too. There and other left-wing YouTubers. We were some of the only people talking about Tara Reid. Like we were the only ones talking about Tara Reid for a long time. You know, it's because Republicans didn't really talk about it all that much because they knew that anytime they talk about something like that, it just brings up Trump's weaknesses. And of course, corporate Democrats didn't talk about it because it makes Joe Biden look bad. And so it was only like certain sources. And so they did a really good job. I mean, Crystal Ball gave a very high profile interview to Tara Reid when no one else would. Like no other big names would. Her and Katie Halper. And that was important. So, but I wonder if in part Rising wanted that because again, it gave them a tool to make Biden look bad, and they might not have done the same if for somebody criticizing Donald Trump. Maybe I'm wrong. Like, I mean, look, people are wrong all the time. Like, look, I've had bad takes. I'm sure I have bad takes. Cenk has had bad takes. You know, Kyle Kulinski, I think, at times has bad takes. Everyone has bad takes. Everyone. When you make multiple videos a day for years, you will have bad takes. It's just a question of how bad are your takes? How frequently are your takes bad? Do you acknowledge the badness of your takes when you make those mistakes? And, like, was your badness good faith or not? Right? Like, right? Like, that's like, is it good? Like, are you bad because, like, it's your economic or social interest or employer interest to be bad? Or are you bad because, like, look, people make mistakes and people learn from those mistakes and change their perspectives, right? So, yeah, like, look, none of this is saying, and none of this is saying, like, don't watch rising. None of this is saying don't watch David Pakman. No, I'm not saying that, of course not. But I'm saying, like, certain projects have certain objectives. And I do think that, like, the Rising show has the objectives of making the Democrats look bad and not necessarily making the Republicans look bad. And I think that the problem with it is that it's, for the most part, when they criticize the Democrats, they're right. So it's not like they're Fox News and it's just all bad faith. But I feel like the impression of it can leave one unbalanced. And then again, though, I mean, look, my show, I don't pretend to have a balance. Like, I don't pretend to offer balanced coverage. I'm an ideologically partisan motivated commentator. I'm open about that. I'm not bad faith, but I have people and parties I support. I'm open about it. My content is guided by that. And you can either like it or not, right? Like, you can like it or not. But, like, when you run a show on a network, maybe there's, like, a different expectation. Like, David Dole and I, like, Mike Figueredo, they're one-man teams, right? Like, they're basically one-man teams. I think some people have editors. Maybe they have somebody that helps them make their thumbnails or something. But I know David Dole's like a one-man team, right? Yeah. I don't think Crystal Ball is a Nazbol. I don't think that's fair. No. I think sometimes she goes overboard about, like, oh, the SJWs are bad. I think she's a little too, like, she goes to that well a little too often, but I don't think she's like, social progressivism is bad. I don't think that's the case. I think that she's critical of how the Democratic Party weaponizes that language against the left, which I am as well. But I don't think she's an asshole. No, David, I think, is mostly a one-person team. We've talked about it. I think he pretty much does it all on his own. He's often talked about how he needs to maybe get some help. But David's pretty much a one-man team. So I don't know. I always get like basically, Monica, it's like you're left-wing economically and right-wing socially. The Naz stands for the thing from 1930s Germany, and the Bol stands for Bolshevik. And so those are like it's kind of a combination of left and right. There's very few people that actually fit that definition, right? Like, I don't know many people that are actually that. None of the people I follow are. I'm just going to get some water, and then I'm going to take some more questions. I'll be right back. Like, look, like, here's the thing about that. I see Caro's question, and I'm going to get to that. But everyone that's like, look, Bernie's an SJW, guys. People like, when I tell people that, sometimes people are like, really? But he is. Bernie is an SJW. Bernie was marching in gay rights parades when it was unpopular, when in certain parts of the country being gay was effectively illegal, and he was marching in parades. Bernie was talking about women becoming president in the 1980s, when most of the time it was laughed off as a joke. Bernie was a supporter of civil rights in Chicago. Bernie is the most SJW member of Congress, at least, of his generation. I'm an SJW. I believe in intersectionality. I believe in cabinet having picks. I actually like gender-balanced cabinets. I like making a priority of picking people of color and LGBTQ people. I think experience is important, knowledge is important, but diversity is crucial. Cabinets and governments and boards should represent the demography of the country. I'm an SJW. The problem is, and Bernie believes what I believe, the problem is, however, neoliberals use the language and discourse of social issues to neutralize the left. That's what the issue is. Right? Like, Bernie is like the quintessential SJW. When Hillary Clinton was supporting Barry Goldwater, Bernie was fighting for civil rights, right? Like, I mean, yeah, like, there's, like, tankies are, like, I don't even know. There's not that many tankies, though, right? Like, I don't know that many tankies. Okay. Lloyd Sackwell says, moving to Canada if Tom Cotton wins in 2024. Lloyd, I wouldn't blame you. One thing I'll say, though, is Tom Cotton would be terrifying, and he would be a far more effective president than Donald Trump. The problem with Tom Cotton is if you look at the polling, he's actually fairly down the list on hypothetical 2024 polling. Like, polls that include Donald Trump is way in front, right? Like, way in front. And then it's Pence. And if you take out Trump, then often his kids rise up. Don Jr. and Ivanka poll really well. Tom Cotton, I kind of feel like ideologically, he would be like a torchbearer for Trumpism. But I don't know if he's going to have the charisma and like to win over Trump-style voters. Like, they want somebody with a certain bravado that he doesn't have. Like, ideologically it works, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work presentationally. Maybe I'm wrong. Caro asks, what are your thoughts on the great Vaush? Excuse my throat. Vaush. I mean, I like him in general. A few things I don't always fully agree with him on. I think, for instance, his suggestion that we stop criticizing Biden during the election was, I think, not fully correct. I, in general, encouraged people to consider at least voting for Joe Biden tactically, but didn't maybe make as hard a demand. But I was always insistent that even as pushing for people to vote for Joe Biden, you must still criticize him. You must still call out his limitations, even before Election Day. Because if you wanted to be ready to challenge him on day one, you can't just shut down that effort fully and then turn it on again. One, that wastes time. And two, people are going to see you as disingenuous. You go from criticizing Biden to only praising him to all of a sudden attacking him again. People are going to see you as 2 or 3-faced. When if you're open on the left, like Nina Turner was, when she was like, voting for Donald Trump is like eating a bowl of S-word, but voting for Biden, it's like eating half a bowl. So like, it's better, but it's still bad. And I think like that was the way to approach it. Never concede that Biden is good. Always criticize him, even if you are telling people to vote for him, because that gives you greater moral credence to oppose him afterwards. And I think that he was much more like no criticism of Biden, no criticism of like the Democrats so much until Election Day, and then we turn it on. I wasn't fully in agreement with that strategy, but in general, I think his content is pretty good. I think one thing people like him and the serfs and others do really well is they take on the right. They take on the right in a strong way, and I think that that's important to see. That's another good thing. I also like how them and the serfs too cover like they talk about mainstream politics, but they also talk about like internet issues, which often fly under the radar of like regular media. So yeah, I'm a fan. Like there are times where like, I don't agree, but I'm a fan. I don't know how much he knows about my content. We do follow one another on Twitter and things like that, but I don't know if he watches my content, but I'm sure he'd find things to disagree about mine. But in general, I'm a fan. But I'm not a regular everyday viewer, but I check in every now and then. I do find him entertaining. Like I find him very I find his style very engaging. And it's different from my own because it's very he's a bit more abrasive than I am. Like he leans into like that style, and it's just it's a different experience than watching me. Brandon's asking me how I feel about Kyle. I like Kyle Kalinske. I like him. I think that he is obviously, he's one of the biggest creators. I think that he brings a good perspective. One thing is, like, sometimes he I think, like, and to be fair, Bernie Sanders does this too, but like, he adopts certain like linguistic things which are like I wouldn't do. Like, for instance, he complains about crony capitalism a lot, but to me, there's no such thing as crony capitalism. There's just capitalism. So, but Bernie does the same thing, and so like it's like, you know, these little things here and there. But like it's rare that I really disagree vehemently with him. But no, so I like Kyle. Again, I don't know if he knows who I am really. We follow one another on Twitter as well. Michael says, do you think the NDP would form government in our lifetime? I mean, my hope is that we do. I mean, I think that maybe Jagmeet Singh could be that guy. He's young, he's charismatic. Young Canadians seem to be willing to vote NDP. I don't know. That's my hope. We'll have to see. I want to say yes, but I mean, going all the way back to 1867 in Canada, only two parties have ever formed government, right? The Liberals and Conservatives. And so it's a big task to do it. But, you know, it can be done. It can be done. One challenge the NDP needs to work on right now is they need to be bolder. The NDP needs to be bolder. Last election, I feel like they failed to put forward free public education as a priority. It was too weak to run on canceling debt, like federal student loan debt. They needed to cancel the entire, or interest on debt, excuse me. They need to go forward and with a full debt cancellation plan, and they need to make post-secondary education free. It's not as easy in Canada in some ways because you have to work with the provinces, but they should make that a priority. I think that they really need to find a way to gain some suburban appeal. That's one of the big weaknesses for the NDP. The NDP is strong in some cities. They are strong in certain working class towns. They're even strong in some rural areas when those rural areas have like a blue collar base. Like not farming so much anymore, but like mining communities, logging communities, things like that. The NDP has strength there. The NDP does abysmally, though, in the suburbs. And they need to find a way to appeal to suburbanites. Like if you look at Ontario, the NDP can win seats in downtown Toronto. They don't always, but they can. They can win seats in Hamilton. They can win seats in the far north. They cannot win seats, though, for the most part, in the 905. Like in like Mississauga, in Aurora, Newmarket. And these suburbs are fast growing areas because as Toronto continues to grow, more and more people move out to them, right? And these types of voters seem to almost be exclusively liberal, conservative swing voters. So they need to find some way of appealing to these types. I don't know what the policy is that appeals to suburbanites that fits the NDP policy book, right? The one challenge right now for the NDP as well is communicating the popularity of its own policies. The NDP is undeniably the party that has the policies people want. Like if you, if you guys want to see it, the recent article I wrote in Jacobin, The recent article I wrote in Jacobin talks about this. So I'll put the link in the description. You can check it out. That in that article, I make the argument that Ivan, do the Greens have the chance to be the Progressive Party? No. Ivan, 0% chance. Zero. No. I think it's more likely they disappear, given that they've been down in the polls. They made a mistake, I think, picking Enemy Paul. If they picked Dimitri Lascaris, I mean, maybe it blows up in their face, maybe, but I think it's because Dimitri's a very unconventional pick, but it could have brought great reward. Enemy Paul is like, what is she that like a liberal leader isn't, right? And so I don't know if like the Greens have made any shift. Odds are they're not going to pass away or anything. They're not going to disappear. But without Haddad or Kuttner or Lascaris as leader, there's no chance they'll become the Progressive Party. There's no chance. There's no chance. Especially because Singh has moved the NDP a little bit further to the left under where it was under Mulcair and even Layton. I don't see it. I don't see it. But the NDP needs to really push this idea. They really need to fundamentally find some way to tell regular Canadians and say, look, guys, we actually support what you want. 90% of you want dental care. Like 75% of you want a wealth tax. 70% of you want what is in effect a Green New Deal or the start of a Green New Deal. And the NDP needs to find some way of communicating that to people. Now, one challenge the NDP has, which is sort of like what third parties have in the States, not as bad because we have an established NDP, but it's like Canadians often vote strategically. So a lot of people vote Liberal to stop Conservatives. And even some Conservatives vote Conservatives to stop Liberals, when there are some Conservatives and especially a lot of Liberals that would vote NDP if they felt they could divorce it from strategy. And that is a challenge. And I don't know what the answer is. Like, if I had the answer, I would be the leader of the New Democratic Party and I would be Prime Minister right now. But I don't have that answer. And so I am where I am. And I'm talking with you guys on YouTube. The fact of the matter is, that's one of the challenges. But it's also a great opportunity. Like, the NDP needs to be confident in itself and say, look, we got a young leader that people like. He's the most popular leader in Canada. And now people know who he is. They didn't last year, really. We have a policy book that when you pull on our policies, every single one of them has support from the majority of every other party's voting base, including Conservatives. They gotta connect the dots. And that's why it's frustrating. And to be clear, part of the challenge is the party needs to be bolder. The party needs to lean into what it is. Sort of like how in the States, it's like the Democrats are like, oh, if we pick Bernie, they're going to call him a socialist. It's like, well, they called Joe effing Biden a socialist. They called Joe Biden a socialist. They'll call anyone a socialist. And same thing here in Canada. New Democrats will often think, oh, well, if we're too radical, if we listen too much to left-wing commentators like Christo, or if we listen too much to Nikki Ashton and Matthew Green and Leah Gazan, like the left-wing members of caucus, and I've interviewed all three on this channel. Go check out those interviews when you have the time. I've interviewed Matthew Green and Nikki Ashton and Leah Gazan. Those, like, the media will call us socialists, and respectable Canadians will be scared of us. But it's like, the NDP is always branded as unreasonably radical, even when it's objectively false. So you got to lean into it. Thoughts on carbon tax? I mean, I'm not opposed to a carbon tax. I think it sort of sidesteps the fundamental issues of like a Green New Deal is crucial. Although I don't necessarily see that a carbon tax can't play a role as part of a Green New Deal. Like, it could be part of it, but I don't think the carbon tax is like the silver bullet that's like going to solve everything. So I'm not opposed to a carbon tax. I think there's value to it, but it's like the liberals have basically said we have a carbon tax and that's our climate plan. It needs to be a Green New Deal upon which a carbon tax is a part of the program. Yeah, like Joseph is saying here, and I made a video on it at the time, where Pete Buttigieg of all people, said, like, look, if I'm the nominee, Trump will call me a socialist. If Joe Biden's the nominee, they'll call him a socialist. If Bernie's the nominee, they'll call him a socialist. Pete Buttigieg was saying this, and Pete Buttigieg was, look, he's a rat and he's disingenuous, I know, but in that moment, he made a lot of sense where he said, look, no matter what we do, no matter who we run, no matter how we couch our message, they will call us socialists. There's no way around it. No matter what we do. We could run on the Republican platform from 2012 of Mitt Romney, and they will call us socialists. So Pete Buttigieg says, look, so what we have to do is have a debate about what we want to be, and be that, and not shy away from being that. Now, what Pete Buttigieg wanted was awful, but like in terms of like the principle there, he was right. Be who you are. And the NDP needs to learn from that. They need to figure out what they want to be. And I think the answer from my perspective is you got to be a party of democratic socialism and be it. David Hinckley says the little I can give right now. Great work, Christo. David, thanks so much for the support. Look, guys, I know that like COVID, unemployment for a lot of people, underemployment for a lot of people, Christmas, holiday season, all of these sorts of things. Like people are stretched right now. So like people will often say to me, like, I'd love to support the channel more. I can't. And I totally get it. I'm immensely grateful for the support I get from everybody already. You know, just know that. Just know that, and know that I bear no ill will for people that are like who don't donate to the channel or whatnot. Like the thing that anyone can do that helps me is like both in the channel but also just like to know like you're enjoying the content, like watch it, like it, share it, those sorts of things. If you want to, if you want to write me a nice note, people do that sometimes. Those things mean a lot. And just know that like, I appreciate all of you so much. I just want to say that, like everyone who comes to the streams regularly, but even folks that, maybe just watch my videos, and maybe don't participate in the streams, but still, if you happen to be watching this stream as your one-off, know that I appreciate you very, very much. So I am going to wrap, because normally we wrap between 10 and 10:30 for those who are new. But I want to say thanks again. Before people go, a couple things. One, do check out some of the videos. I mentioned a couple videos today. Do check them out. They're fantastic, I think. And they cover over some of the things we talked about today, maybe in a bit more organized of a fashion. We also, I dropped a link there in the Discord, so do go check my Discord out. For those who have yet to follow me, consider following me on Twitter. Twitter is where I have a lot. I'm on there fairly frequently, and it's a good source because I often comment on things that maybe I don't talk about on the channel because it's just a quick little thought. So it's a good place to see some of those things. If you want to support the channel, again, I think the biggest thing is if you can if you can make a habit of watching the videos, that's the single biggest thing, because when you watch them, not only does it generate a little bit of ad revenue for the channel, but when you watch a video and you click on it and you watch it all the way through, YouTube senses that as a good thing, and it shares the videos out with maybe new people who might have not seen the content otherwise. Likewise, share it to Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, things like that. I have to look at maybe starting a Reddit. I don't have a Reddit yet. I don't know if my channel is quite big enough, but maybe I'll start a Reddit at some point, or there'll be like a Reddit or something. But just like those sorts of things. But if you do have the means and the desire, you can become a member of the channel here on YouTube. You can click the join button. There's a link to Patreon where you can support the channel. You can also make one-time donations on PayPal and things like that. And keep in mind, for the next stream I do, I'm going to start taking viewer questions. So if you're a Patreon supporter, you can send me a message on Patreon. Just maybe put like question in the subheading, and I can compile those questions and we can go over them on streams. And then that way, we can have maybe a more defined question and answer segment, and maybe keep that a bit more organized. One final thing, and I'll get to Daniel's super chat. One final thing before that, and my final goodbye is, I'll likely not be streaming next week for a couple reasons. One, I might be visiting some family, and because of that, the internet might be spotty. And so it could be a bit of an issue. Also, it is 2 days before Christmas, so it could be a busy day spending time with families and Brianna and the baby and all those things. So that's something to consider. I probably won't stream. If I change my mind for whatever reason and I decide to, I'll let you guys know with at least a little bit of notice. So likely the next stream is going to be on the 30th, Wednesday the 30th. So that's going to probably be there. And it says here, Daniel says, thanks for talking NDP. We really need that here in Canada. Some good faith criticism of the NDP. No one talks about the NDP, and that's a problem. Yeah, 100%, Daniel. It's something I want to do more on the channel. I definitely have to find a space to carve out for it. I know with COVID and everything, it's been really hard, but I am still in the process of really getting a podcast going. And when that podcast does launch, it's not going to be an if, it's going to be a when, but I can't say exactly when. It will be overwhelmingly focused on Canada. So I feel like that'll be a good outlet for those who really want my take on Canada, say on a weekly basis, to have to have that. It'll likely be one of those podcasts where kind of like a Chapo thing where it's like 1 week free, 1 week for like a $5 Patreon, because we probably won't have any other way to monetize a podcast, unlike YouTube. But, details will come with that. But it will be a podcast focused on the Canadian left, and there will be lots of discussions, positive and critical, of the NDP, and in a way that I don't think a lot of other podcasts would do. And Michael says, like your channel. Michael, thank you so much. I like your support and your kind words. And I think we're going to end on that. Guys, thank you so much. Have a good one. If I don't see you before Christmas, for those who celebrate, Merry Christmas. I'll see most of you hopefully before New Year's, but if I don't, have a Happy New Year as well. And I look forward to continuing to talk about these things with you guys. Have a good one. Thanks so much. See you soon.